warning at the start of the podcast. This week's episode, we discuss some things that other listeners may find quite distressing. Hello folks, and welcome to this week's That's Mental Mate with me, Brad. I'm joined today by long 20-year-old, not 20, you're not 20, but our friendship is 20 years old, Tasha Barron.
Hello.
Me and Tasha, like I said, go way back to school days. Whenever you were Barron and I was Chambers, and you stood in front of me in Assembly Hall.
That's very true.
And we just annoyed each other ever since then.
Basically. Yeah.
But you've always been very open about your mental health, and I think you helped me a lot when I was a teenager. And even now I would still come to you when I was feeling a bit down or looking for advice or anything, so you're stuck with me.
Basically, not that helps my mental health in any way, but
I just burden on to you. So we start every podcast asking how you are.
I'm grand, busy, but fine. I'm currently in fertility treatments, so that's up the wire, but I'm persistent with it, so I'm okay so far. No many wobbles, so doing alright with it,
Yeah. No wee babies yet?
No wee babies yet, just a lot of injections.
Yeah.
Which is very fun.
So do you maybe want to start by talking about the first time you experienced a wobble in your mental health, or you felt like this wasn't right, or?
I think that my first wobbles would go right back to when I was about 8 years old. I was given a proper diagnosis when I was 11, but my first wobbles were definitely at a young age, at about 8. I used to always experience, and a lot of classmates unfortunately had to deal with it too, was I would cry consistently. I cried a lot, but I would cry consistently, and I would complain a lot of sore stomachs, and like the likes of like P4, and I mean this was consistent. This was every day for hours on end in class. It was always sort of seen as just didn't want to go to school or something like that, or I was checked for sort of medical problems. But I learned sort of then after the years that was a somatic something, that was a physical something of depression, and I was always very anxious about 8. But I'd say my main things of something is not right when I was about 11, so starting first year was my main oh my god moments with my mental health, definitely.
And it seemed to be, you said about school, I know that from being in your class then for 5 years, that a lot of your mental health and anxiety kind of went around school times. And
oh yeah, definitely had a phobia of school. That was absolutely it sort of, a lot of my mental health started from home life, definitely, and it was, that is the main focus behind where my mental health came from. But specifically, school was a big fear of mine, extremely big fear. Specifically, starting into secondary school, it heightened extremely bad. And, we're talking 20 years ago, so mental health wasn't sort of a thing that was talked about in children at all. It wasn't something that the school seen as, this isn't right. But, this particular school, there was some type of sort of physical assaults that happened in that school, and that definitely added to being scared of the school as well, and sort of not understanding what was wrong with me, and not sort of, it was just deemed as this kid doesn't want to go to school. But I definitely had a phobia of school. I was terrified. I would say I'm still terrified of schools sometimes, secondary schools, but it was terrifying. That was one of the main things of where my mental health really plummeted.
And you said there about you feel like your home life was the trigger. Was it not weird for you, because in other people you could see if a home life is a trigger, they go to school and they don't actually want to leave, whereas you were the complete opposite?
Absolutely. That was, it was something that, kind of confused me, why was I scared of school? I didn't ever want to leave my house at all, ever. One of the things was that sort of, it was based around, there was quite a lot of abuse at home from my biological father, emotional and physical. but there was a protection there of wanting to protect my mum. And at that age, you know, I believed I could do that, and I believed that me being with her at all times sort of would stop that in a way. So there was definitely not wanting to leave my mum, but there was something about the school, the idea of being closed in somewhere and not being able to escape, that really got me towards the school. You know, and I easily loved school. You know, anybody who was, you know, when I was in primary school, I would have said that I was quite the nerd, didn't get into any problems at school. You know, I wasn't that sort of child that was a goody two shoes. I loved, you know, learning. So for that change to happen, there was obviously something very wrong, but it was being closed in, not being able to leave that area for some reason just stuck with me. And then obviously, you know, there was the sort of incidences with the teachers, the specific teachers. That was sort of, you know, it was closed in rooms and things like that, sort of held in places. That really amplified that, definitely. And it would still be something sort of that I would struggle with today, sort of being in not in a small enclosed area, but feeling like I can't escape from somewhere. School did that to me. It just completely destroyed my life. It completely destroyed my brain and everything. Just the thought of having to get out of the school, get out of anywhere, was always something that really amplified my mental health.
Do you think it had elements of maybe agoraphobia or claustrophobia or anything like that?
I think definitely agoraphobia. There was, you know, I didn't want to leave house, but at the same time, you know, there was such terrible things going on at home. I definitely think there was agoraphobia there. You know, even coming out of school, you know, I left school at something ridiculous, like 15, and I was homeschooled for my GCSEs, and I just didn't leave the house. It was just as simple as that. It was a well-known thing in my friend group that Tasha doesn't leave the house, Tasha doesn't go anywhere. I tried all the time, but it was just constant panic. It was a constant battle of mine to leave the house, and we're not talking sort of days here, we're talking about like weeks of not leaving this house, not sort of leaving my room even. I was always in the house, always, and that was something I really struggled with as well. But definitely, say agoraphobia did play a lot into it. Anxiety played a lot into it, and depression, which, you know, I was eventually diagnosed with them. But yeah, it was definitely sort of leaving my own space was terrifying to me.
And you said that you feel like that's triggered from your biological dad being in the house, but whenever I met you, I don't think he was in the house then, and he left at that stage. I don't ever remember your biological dad living there. Yeah, so I think there was always physical abuse there, but the mental health, the manipulation, the emotional abuse was constant, and that's sort of, it went on till I was about 11, ironically, just at the time period where my mental health went dramatically down. When I went to secondary school was when, you know, our relationship got really dangerous. There was a lot of manipulation with him. It was the time when I got really, you know, I had tried for the first time there in my life. I, you know, was self-harming quite frequently, and it was down to that. But, you know, he did eventually leave the house through social services. He was, I believe it was second year, and that was sort of my doing. It was through, you know, I was away with child mental health services who were trying to work with the family, trying to work with me, but he was legally removed from the house by social services when, I think it was second year, I'd actually ironically written the letter in school through one of our sort of key stage 2 exams. Everyone was sort of writing about experiences, and for some reason I had decided that was the time to sort of try and get some help, and I wrote about the abuse at home and the abuse from my dad. And I remember being stopped by an English teacher specifically asking about it, and I sort of said, you know, yeah, and didn't make a big deal of it, and social services just turned up the door one day and asked me if it was true, and the whole family was there, and I sort of said, yeah, we don't have a good relationship, this is the way it is, and he was told to leave the home. And that was, you know, we obviously tried to build our relationship afterwards, but that
just, it was never successful. But yeah, he was legally removed from the house at second year, so he was in my life on and out till I was 16, but I don't think he was ever really around any of my friends. It was not something that I really talked about.
I think I only maybe met him the once on the formal. I think that was about it.
Yeah.
Or was he at the formal? I feel like he might have been at the formal.
I think he was, yeah. I think he did show up. Yeah, again, very, very morphed relationship with that. It was a constant sort of battle of on again, off again, and constantly trying to have that father figure. But it was not working. The more I had him in my life, the more my mental health sort of depleted rapidly, because even though he was out of the house, the manipulation and sort of the comments about sort of who I was and the way I was and how I looked was constant. And I realised that it wasn't working no more. It wasn't working for me. It wasn't working for him. It wasn't working for anybody, really. Everybody's mental health was really going down. Yeah, it was just a bad relationship, really.
And you said you started self-harming when he was in the house?
Yeah, I started self-harming. I remember the first time I really, really self-harmed. I used to use, obviously at that age, you're 11, sort of, the girl gets, the first razor blade for shaving their legs, going to school, skirts on, things like that. But, yeah, I was at a really, really bad point. I just wanted to die all the time, first year. And the more that I didn't go to school, the more I felt sort of left out from peers. And then there would be arguments because, the biological father was still in the house. Emotional abuse would really play a factor, and I just didn't believe that I was worth anything. And it just got so overwhelming that I would, take the razor and just really... I think that from the first self-harming I did, obviously I was 11, the first thing I wanted, it was done with the intent to die, and it was quite serious cuts, multiple cuts over my arms, which I can still see sometimes now when I do tan. But that was the first time, was probably my worst time that I had ever self-harmed. And razors were sort of taken from the home. There was a lot of stages where, obviously there wasn't knives in the house, there wasn't things like that, because my mental health was so over the edge that anything could be used, sort of. Yeah, that I'd say that was probably the first experience with self-harm, was about 11, first year, that sort of area.
That is still very young though.
Yeah, it is, it's, you speak about these things sort of, it is very young, but this was my life. It was not so much when I was 8, obviously it was, I still believed that was stomach pains. I cried my eyes out, and sort of I believed that the abuse was just normal in families, just be told these type of things and sort of be punished in that way and things like that, and just to sort of walk on eggshells. I just thought everybody did that. When I went to secondary school was when it really, obviously it's quite dark to think that, 11-year-old thought that way, and 11-year-old had these diagnoses and sort of self-harmed and did all this morbid sort of stuff. But that was just life back then. That was constant. I dealt with a lot of things that a lot of older people would struggle with, quite morbid things. So to deal with that, yeah, I think it sort of changed me. It was a very dark childhood.
And where did you learn about it?
I actually sort of, my mental health, I didn't learn at all about it until I sort of, it was always sort of seen as, I went through a stage where, mental health just wasn't a thing for children. In those years, 20 years ago, it wasn't, children didn't have any problems. I think that autism and possibly ADHD was sort of, obviously it was there, but it was never really talked about thing. Autism had just sort of became, possible maybe. But depression and sort of suicide and things like that, it was just deemed that, I didn't want to go to school, or there was a bad kid, or, emotional kid, something like that, bullying. It was never seen that a child could have mental health problems. And I think that's where the school struggled a lot, that I had these problems, was just, it wasn't deemed possible back then. But I learned through my own conditions, through just learning myself. I ended up doing my degree in psychology because I took an interest in it, because no one else would really tell you what that meant. You know, I was sort of given that you've got depression, you're suicidal, that's it. And that was sort of the way I was told, and I didn't really understand, and I had to sort of learn for myself.
Where did you learn about self-harming?
I don't think I learned anywhere from self-harming, really. I think it was just sort of an idea to do. I knew that I had a razor myself, and I knew that I could fucking do it. You know, self-harm was sort of talked about, but at 11 years old you didn't really understand what that meant. And I just knew that, I always knew that shaving your legs, you're meant to go up and down, so I knew that going side to side would hurt, so I just took the razor and that was it.
And did your mum ever find out, or?
I think my mum definitely found out. It was, you know, it was in the bath, it was quite a graphic scene. You know, like I said, there was, you know, it was both arms the entire way up. But, you know, I wanted to end my life, but I didn't really know that it had to be done on the, you know, on the wrists through a vein. It was just sort of everywhere on the tops of my arms. I think she really struggled with that, to see that sort of thing. You know, I still feel,
especially at 11 years old.
Yeah, you know, I would still feel guilty about that. It's still something, you know, my mum's seen a lot of dark stuff with me that, you know, most parents wouldn't have to deal with. But again, I think she knew that there was something really wrong. The reasons why I did that sort of stuff. Again, it was sort of, you know, my dad was still there. It was just kind of another way to kick me when I was down. So it was always sort of, you know, I remember sort of getting patched up and things. My mum sort of like, you know, cleaning, and she was upset, obviously. And I remember my dad sort of saying, you know, you'll never get a boyfriend with those cuts now. You'll be walking with your boyfriend, and he'll be, you know, he'll think that's a bit weird doing that, or there was some sort of dig mentioned about it, sort of thing that would sort of upset me more. And that was sort of what he got his kicks from, definitely. But my mum dealt with a lot. My mum was really dealt with it.
Poor winners.
Poor old winners. I don't know how she stuck it through. She dealt with a lot.
And then you were saying about, it got to the stage you just didn't want to leave the house at all, and I obviously remember that. I just always come after school to your house, or you were getting homeschooled. But then for a time then, whenever we started going out to bars and stuff, you seemed okay. But I always remember like going out with friends, like even when we were 15, 16, and us going out like drinking in the park or something, and I just remember you always being so hyper vigilant. Like there could be like a couple fighting like 100 metres away, and then nothing to do us, and you were so they're fighting now, we have to get out of here.
Yeah.
And you think that was down to your home life, and it just kind of, you were getting, not flashbacks maybe, but kind of...
Yeah, I definitely think I got flashbacks, but a lot of it was just, that was constant. You know, in school, I had it very well, but I dealt with that, you know, I would go into school. Sometimes I would go into school, and I would seem perfectly fine, the other sort of students, and I think that sort of added to... You know, she just doesn't want to go to school. She doesn't come to school, that sort of thing, which was embarrassing. But
I remember you saying that you felt like everyone was talking about you.
That was something that, you know, that was constantly in my mind until I was about 27, 28. That was still, you know, I've always dealt with that. Anything, I'd be terrified of anybody speaking about me, of anything, you know, like the incident in the park you said, I should say, anything coming back to me, you know, in my brain. That couple fighting, coming back to me, someone fighting, I need to get out of this area right now, sort of thing. It was just born under me, sort of thing. It was bred under me that something would come back on me.
And then it seemed like you were getting better, coming out to the park and coming out to bars and stuff, and then you seemed to retreat into yourself a lot after that. Maybe your early 20s, late teens. I remember you seemed to be going out more, and then you just stopped and you couldn't.
Yeah.
Was there like a trigger?
I think that it's constant. I think, you know, it's not something that ever goes away. You know, that sort of being scared to go out, or anxiety, or depression, or suicidalness. That's never been something that sort of I won over. It's always been something that, you know, throughout the years, even at my 20s, my late 20s, even now, it's something that would constantly go away, come back. You know, it's a constant process of that. And definitely, you know, the anxiety of needing to go out and wanting to go out and wanting to be like your peers and do these things. Anxiety, the more I worked at it, the more it just stayed the same. So I would sort of give up trying to do it. And then when you're in the house and you're not doing that, you become depressed. You know, you become suicidal again. You see that nothing's sort of worth it. And it's a constant process. You know, it never stops. That's just something that became the norm of my life. But I mean, again, like you say, you know, I did go through a lot of stages where I just wouldn't leave. And I think that I was really lucky that I had a lot of friends that understood that and supported me with it. But yeah, that was just a constant battle with it.
And was there a point when you felt like you could come out of it, or do you still feel now there's days where you just don't want to leave the house for a few days? Or
I think there would still definitely, I'd still struggle with it. You know, from different aspects. I know everybody sort of deals with, you know, I feel ugly, I'm not leaving the house sort of thing. Or, you know, I don't feel like socialising. Socialising is constantly draining to me. I've never understood that. You know, I've been sort of told that because I didn't go to school, I didn't develop those social skills that you develop when you're a child. You know, talking, having a conversation with somebody is a process that, if I know I have to have a conversation with someone else, sit in my head for hours, sort of, and I constantly think about what I'm going to say, how that will go, how did I sound. You know, it's not something that I ever developed, right? You know, I feel like, I'm not going to be like sort of up my own head, but I feel like I know I'm quite a normally intelligent person, but the aspect of socialising and social skills they just flew over me completely. But I would struggle with that all the time, yeah.
And when did you start taking tablets for your mental health?
I started taking tablets when I was 11, when I was diagnosed with clinical depression. At that time where, you know, trying to end my life was constant, I started taking tablets. And again, no one speaks about how, you know, you don't just find a tablet that's right for you. There's a constant battle of, you know, which tablets should she be taking. There's no doses for children. Do you know what I mean? It's not a thing that's made for children. So there was a constant battle of different tablets. And I can easily say that some of them tablets made me absolutely crazy. You know, I went through stages. Specifically, I remember a stage when I was in about second year that I was just not myself. I was completely manic. I don't know if that was down to different tablets. I didn't know that there were changed a lot of tablets then, but I was a disaster to live with. I became sort of the abusive one. You know, we used to play hockey in the school that I went to, and I can honestly say that I smashed windows with the hockey stick. I screamed. I made my mother's life hell. I made her life hell. She admitted that she wanted to put me into care because she just couldn't cope. I was disastrous, and to not find the right tablet is a dangerous thing when you're an adult anyway. So to be dealing with all that when you were younger also, and it's still something, you know, it's still a sort of tablets. I feel like tablets can be easily, this day and age, they're just thrown at you. You know what I mean? It's just like you go to doctors and sort of, I feel up, you know, I don't feel my best. I feel like I want to end my life. It's like, well, here's a tablet and I'll see you later. You know, tablets are so easily used now, but no one talks about the effects of what they can actually do.
Yeah, I know the few times that I've approached a doctor for sick note for work, when I was working in retail, and the couple of times I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And I just remember being like, I need a sick note, I need a few weeks out to get my head sorted. Yeah. And I was throwing tablets, and I was like, I don't want them. And the only reason I went on them was after I got attacked and I couldn't sleep, and I got sleeping tablets, and they put my body to sleep and not my mind. And yeah, that's what activated my sleep paralysis, definitely. And then I went off them. I think I only took them for like a week, and then that scared me, so I stopped. And then I got anti-anxiety ones then, I think, and they said it takes 6 weeks for you to adjust it, and I didn't notice any
think that's what scares a lot of people. A lot of people that I've spoke to that have taken the tablets have been told that 6 weeks is horrible. No, that 6 weeks you can feel nothing at all, and to some people that's even harder than feeling everything that you are feeling.
I remember feeling really sick, and the headaches, really bad headaches, but I didn't feel any different, like anxiety wise. I remember being probably around the same age, started running around with you and thinking, I need antidepressants, that they're my cure. I'll take them and I'll wake up tomorrow morning and be 100%, and that's not the case for people who think that. Like, whereas now I've got a completely different outlook. Now I'm like, I don't want to
and a lot
take them, and that's fine for me. But I know there's, like, I've spoke to people on the podcast and they've been like, I couldn't survive through a certain time without them, or I couldn't survive now without them.
Yeah.
And how do you feel like you fit into that spectrum?
I think there was definite times that I needed medications to love. Obviously, when I was in first year, I needed something desperately. I needed something in first year. I just needed someone to listen and to understand sort of the process. But as well, tablets don't fix everything. You know, I strongly believe, and a lot of people that specialists that I've spoke to strongly believe that quite clearly my mental health problems and the problems that I still struggle with today are down to my development as a child. You know, as I was young, it's sort of something called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. So the abuse and sort of the relationship with my biological father had a big impact. So sort of I don't feel like I made a drastic change until I ended that relationship with my dad. That's when I felt the biggest benefit to my mental health. But at the same time, medications played a big part in my life. They definitely helped me. But they can, they don't always help. They can make someone even worse. I think it's completely personal. I think it's a scary thing as well. They think that, a child needs them sort of medications. You know, it's okay to say about how ridiculous it is, as an adult, that it's so easily to get them medications, but a child's brain's always adjusting. It's always, it's haywired as it is. We all talk about sort of growing pains and, girls changing and going crazy when they're younger, but to add medications to that also is hormones, to add medications on top of that, could make anything worse.
You just have to look at kids nowadays and schools and TV dramas about schools, and kids are ruthless, like.
Yeah, definitely. Kids terrify me sometimes, but at the same time, there are some things involved now in schools. We're coming under an era now where mental health is more openly talked about. There is counsellors in schools and things like that. There is sort of, it's more open to children. I'd say children could really, and young people, I would hope that they can talk about a lot more than, what we did when we were 20 years ago. But I'd still say, like, suicide is still a big dark, for the entire world. You can sit and talk to your friends about how you're not feeling the best or you're depressed, and you still don't feel like anybody will sort of judge you. But to bring up that idea of, I've been thinking a lot about dying, or I've been thinking about ending my life, it's still something that a lot of people struggle with, and how would they be perceived when in real life a lot of people deal with it.
And it's probably, you don't know what way to react as well. If someone tells you, I was sitting the other night and I just wanted to end my life, like, do you contact their partner, their mum, talk to them about it, contact the authorities? What do you do? Like, there's that question mark as well, as to, unless you're medically trained or have dealt with something like that before, people could react in completely different ways. But panic, pretend nothing happened, move on. Like, it depends who you open up to as well, I suppose. Yeah,
exactly. It depends who you open up to. I think we've got to a stage now, and I'm definitely, I do it myself a lot. Work humour has changed our perception of it. We can easily talk about to our friends, I just wanted to die. Oh, the day was terrible, I'm just going to kill myself. It's a joke. It's something that, we all sort of use as a drastic way to say that, the day was bad. To have your friend turn around and be like, I would just want to end my life. could be sort of perceived as just them just being like, you know, you don't want to take that wrong. You know, I don't want to sort of do all this and start to get concerned about you when I picked that up wrong and it was just a joke that you were saying. But at the same time, and it
seems to be a lot recently. A lot younger people do it. Like, I know I've worked with people and they're a lot younger than me, maybe 10 years plus, and they're like, oh, I have working this Saturday, I'm just going to kill myself. And you're like, Jesus Christ. But then that took me a while to be like, oh, he's just saying, like, fuck my life.
Yeah.
Or, oh, I'm raging that I'm working Saturday.
Yeah,
but I was just like, Jesus.
But it is weird that, you know, we can, you know, I've got the stage where I do that a lot, and I could easily say that to a complete stranger. Just going to end my life. Oh my God. But to actually seriously mean it and say it is terrifying to some people, about actually saying, you know, well, you know what, I've had thoughts about my life, or I've had thoughts about what it would be like if I died. And so many people deal with that. Just, you know, it's important to remember that just because you have those thoughts, it doesn't mean that there's anything particularly wrong with you. You know, it's just natural. It's natural to sort of think about death, and that's what I think a lot of things go wrong. You know, you can have thoughts of suicide where you don't actually want to die, but you just sort of think, what would that be like for me to do? Because it's just the way your brain, you know, thinks and sort of has a thought about life. It doesn't mean that you're going to end your life, but when someone hears you say that, you know, I had thoughts the other night of what would it be like if I died. Alarm bells ring, as you said, and panic sets in for some people. And yeah, it can be misunderstood, it can be over exaggerated, it can be under exaggerated. You really never know what some way someone means that.
And have you ever approached anyone like that and said?
I think there was, you know, it was definitely stages where I wanted to end my life. I would just try it. You know, it was, you know, I'm just doing this. I had a lot of experiences with that. First year, I remember I had a book specifically, and I don't know where it sort of came from, but I knew that, you know, I knew I wanted to die, and I knew that, you know, this is what I wanted to do. I don't want to live here anymore. I don't want to deal with this. I just want my life to end. But for some reason, I would write it down, and I think my mum started finding the book, you know, and would sort of bring it to my counsellor and sort of would use it as some sort of way to say, you know, there's clearly something wrong with her. She's thinking this. That was quite sort of dark and morbid. That was like actively suicidal. I've mentioned it before, and again, it doesn't matter whether it's a professional or not. I find that it's bizarre how some people can pick that up. You know, I think that when my gran died, I was really close with her about 4 or 5 years ago, and I really started struggling. You know, I started struggling with anxiety. I started struggling with my depression really bad, and I was struggling with sort of a lot of different things happening in my life that I wasn't sure, you know, is this another diagnosis that's going to happen to me? And I wanted to die. I got to stages where I just wanted to end my life. I wanted to die. And I went through the process properly, and I had spoke to my mum about it. And again, my mum was unbelievable. She just seems to know everything. She knows about how I'm feeling before even I know it. But I went to adult services, and I remember it was an emergency appointment. You know, I had went to my mental health practitioner and my doctors, and they were like, you know, we need to get this sorted, we need to get you seen now. And I went on, and she was like, you know, I said, you know, I just want to die, I just want to end my life. I can't cope anymore. I've been fighting my whole life, I'm just tired. And she was literally said, sort of, you know, I don't know why you're in front of me. I said, I don't know what you mean. And at this time, I wouldn't have spoken up for myself at all. Even 4 years ago, I would have just sat and took it. And I think that's, you know, when you're at a mental health service, you're at your complete lowest. You don't have the fight in you to say, well, you can't say that to me. That's wrong of you to say that. But she was sort of like, you know, I don't know why you're in front of me. I don't know why this appointment's been made, why you're here. And it started as an emergency appointment as well. I don't get it. And she was like, well, you've dealt with this your whole life. Sure, you know how to deal with it by now. And it was sort of like, I don't know what to do. I had thoughts of self-harming again, which I hadn't done in a long time. And she sort of said about, you know, is your pup up for reinstatement? And I didn't understand what she meant at the time. It was personal independence. Personal. So I had known of this sort of like a DLA. Yeah. So I had known this
official umbrella.
Yeah.
Benefits.
And I sort of known about, you know, what is that? And she kept looking it up, and she was asking away, you know, when's your pup up for renewal? You're clearly here for a renewal. And this was in the mental health hospital. This was a licensed psychologist, a clinical psychologist in front of me, and she was saying it. And this was only, a couple of years ago. And I said, I don't understand what you're on about. No, and I sort of, she explained it. And I was like, no, it's not up. It's not up because, I don't have that. I haven't had that in years. I had it when I was younger, and DLA, I had it when I was younger, and I didn't really know what she was talking about. And again, she just started saying, this is clearly just exaggerated. You're clearly not going to end your life. You're fine. And she was, well, what do you have, what's been stopping you from ending your life? And I sort of said, well, one of the main, and again, it's always been something that has stopped me from ending my life is my family, my mum, to do that to her. She would obviously be the one to find me. She would never be the same. My family would deal with it. And that sort of burden stops me from ending my life. And they just seen that as a good thing. It's like, well, you're not going to end your life because you're scared of ending your life. You're not going to do it. And that was sort of, I said sort of, I was completely blindsided, and this was a professional that was sitting in front of me. And it's, it's not the first time that that's happened. I'm sure that plenty of places, I'm sure there's plenty of adult services members who are actually nice. I didn't experience that. And the wait lists are disgusting. Unfortunately, I've never had an experience of adult services that was nice. So to go and say that to somebody, it's not always possible. It's not always possible for a lot of people to reach out, because you could meet a doctor that's just going to be like, no. People just have still that perception of mental health that not exist, and they're in the mental health profession.
Whenever you went to see her, were you still taking your tablets, or were you still seeing a counsellor, or did you feel like you didn't need to take those things or go and see a counsellor anymore? Do you feel like that was why? Or
I think I've spent most of my life on my medications, just because going off those medications has always shown to be quite a really hectic time for me when I go off them. So I have been on them for about 20 years, and I've accepted that. I've accepted, obviously, there's them thoughts of, do you really want to be on medication your entire life? But it's obviously something that I need, and that's just the way it is. Yeah, I was on the medications. Counselling, again, in Northern Ireland, and I will openly say it pays to pay. That is the only way that counselling goes. I've had counselling before. I've had CBT, which obviously is for sort of intrusive thoughts and things like that there, which I also struggled with. I've been diagnosed with OCD, anxiety, and the waiting lists are disgusting. In Northern Ireland, it's ridiculous. And I was told again by the same lady, she was all, you're not going to get counselling here. And I was like, well, again, I was sort of like, I don't understand what you mean. I was, the inside of me wanted to turn around and be like, what the are you talking about? I'm here for help. Help me. She's like, the only way you're going to get counselling is if you pay for it. She says the waiting lists, you're going to be waiting about 18 months. And that was, I'd say it was about 3 years ago, and I still have yet to hear even a letter about that sort of counselling era.
But you were seeing a counsellor when you were 11?
I saw a counsellor when I was 11. I was with it's called CAMS, so Child and Mental Health Services. Any young people that I've talked about, again, they've told me as well that they're shit. They've told me, I've always heard the experiences of CAMS does nothing. I heard now that, when kids say they're suicidal, they get told to have a bath or a cup of tea. But it wasn't, I was really lucky that that was a safe haven for me. I had one counsellor my entire 7 years that I was there, and she was amazing. And, she really cared, and she spoke to me, and she tried her hardest. She tried with family therapy, with my biological father and my family and things like that. And she really did, she was nowhere near what I dealt with adult services, but there was empathy there. There was, she genuinely cared. And I think that's one of the reasons why I survived my childhood, really, was her. So I had a positive experience with CAMS, strangely.
And then whenever you turned 18, was that taken away from you?
Yeah, so when you turn 18, CAMS, they can't legally talk to you anymore. It is adult services. And adult services, has always had a very negative outlook. I was warned by them before, by CAMS, that, adult services is a lot different. But it's really cold. It's more check a box, see you later. And I've never really had a good experience with adult mental health services. And I think that the really sad thing is that people who are now suddenly starting to struggle with their mental health have to deal with that. You know, you get people who stand on the bridge and want to end their life. And that's, you know, when you want to end your life, that is the worst feeling in your head. That's the worst place to be. I can't describe that feeling of being ready to end your life. I think that only people that have experienced that will understand. But to then be told, you know, to be talked down off a bridge, or, you know, talked and taken to hospital, and they're sort of like, right, well, you're not going to end your life now, I'll see you later. Wait, about 8 weeks. I'll see you in about 8 weeks. You know, to go from that sort of adrenaline, horrible feeling of like, this is it, to I'm going to get help, to, well, we'll help you when we get around it, sort of thing, is ridiculous. You know, even to, I think if people think that when you're going to end your life and you get talked down, or you get talked, or you go to the hospital or whatever, when you are in your life, you'll be put in a safe place where you won't do that. It's even hard to get into those safe places now. The likes of Grantia, which is in Derry, it's like gold dust to get into that sort of place. They'll just send you home, and that's it. No, it's completely backwards. I feel that, you know, mental health services are completely backwards, and that's not down to one person, you know, that's down to a lot of things, but that's just the way it is.
And have you had any counselling in your adult years?
I've had a lot of counselling, and it's always sort of came back to, I had counselling just after my nan passed. That was, again, not through adult services. I'm still waiting for that. But that was through my doctor's office. So I don't know how that happened, but it was some sort of, you know, students that came in and sort of been doing these sort of counselling sessions. And again, it always, no matter what counselling I've always had, it's always came back to, you know, what I experienced as a child and my relationships with my dad and the things that he told me, and how that sort of impacted on my self-esteem and, you know, impacted on my self-worth and how I view myself different to others and things like that. It's always sort of where that'll come back to. So I'm well aware now of where it's come from, but how to proceed and how to change that sort of thinking is always something that I'll struggle with. But again, it's just something you get used to.
And you grew up and you studied psychology at Open University, and you're in a job now that's psychology based with children. Would you, from a medical standpoint, or sorry, should I say professional, not medical, professional standpoint, and from a personal standpoint, do you see a difference, or do you see that this should be the way forward?
What do you mean? Do you mean? So
you said about how bad the services are on a personal level.
Yeah.
And now you've studied it, and you say you wanted to understand more of why you were feeling like this and that kind of thing, and you obviously work now in an environment where you counsel children. Would you say that it's, I'm trying to think of a way to put it, do you see similarities between, because you've seen both ends, where some people only have seen one? Do you agree with what everyone's saying on both sides, or do you think there's more that could be done?
I think there's definitely more that could be done. You know, I have, you know, experience with counselling children. I've never met a child who's went through CAMS and has seen any positives in it. That's just my experience with them. But, you know, again, it's possible for both ways. I can see that there seems to be some sort of lack of empathy sometimes. You know, don't get me wrong, I think there is probably some really good people on there. But they're limited to the supplies that they have. It's not one specific counsellor's problem or fault that they've got a backlist of God knows how many months and God knows how many kids or adults or anything. But I think it's telling that, you know, this town is riddled with mental health issues. It's riddled with addiction problems. You know, it's quite clear that Derry does need something put in place for mental health. You know, the funding's not there. The want to change that is not there higher up, I believe. You know, and we sort of talk about, well, money's limited and things like that there, and maybe it is just from personal experience that I know how detrimental mental health can be if it's bad, but you have to see that, you know, we have a town, you know, when you think about it, we have a town that has a bridge that is specifically talked about that people end their life on, you know, and that's a common, well-known thought. You know, that's a scary thing to think of, that, you know, why is a chopper up? Oh, well, someone's jumped the bridge. Do you know, that's just the way it is, and we have a specific team that unfortunately has to deal with that, which God love them all. It's a job I could never experience, but again, it's, you know, there should be more involved. That's as simple as that. Our town can find thousands for Halloween when it's needed, the amount of money that goes on Halloween, and that's, you know, obviously you can put money into that, but, you know, it's, I think that a lot of people in Derry would agree that, you know, if we didn't have fireworks for 1 year and we had an addiction centre, it might be a bit better once. Do you know what I mean? It's, yeah, I just believe there should be more put into it. There should be more effort. There should be more care in our community.
And whenever your nan passed and you found yourself in that situation where you wanted to end your life and you were asking for help, what helped you? What brought you back from the edge?
I think I'm really lucky that the people I have in my life have dealt with me my whole life. They understand, you know, how my mental health goes, and how, you know, if I go on to that I clearly need help. Yeah, and, you know, I've dealt with, as they have said before, you know, I've dealt with it. I understand my brain a lot, but just because you've dealt with it before doesn't mean you know the instructions on how to fix it. Yeah, I mean, I still struggle with it, but it's just about sort of persevering. And one of the main things is about being honest about it. You know, I've always been an advocate for talking about it, because I know from experience, not talking about it, what that can do to someone. So talking about it with my family, my mum specifically. Again, my nan was always there to sort of talk about it with. Talking about it with my partner, sort of talking about it with anybody. And I think that if you don't have those people in your life that you can talk to about it, they shouldn't be in your life. You know, I've had a lot of sort of friendships and things like that when I was younger, that, you know, you felt uncomfortable bringing up mental health, not just sort of suicide, but, you know, talking about, you know, I don't really feel the best today, I don't really want to go here, I don't want to do this, I'm dealing with this. To have, you know, to have someone in your life that you turn around and say that to, and they're like, catch yourself on, wise up, you'll be fine, sort of, you know, they shouldn't be in your life. That's my personal experience of it. You know, a friend is a friend through everything. So I luckily have those people in my life now, like you're, you know, like friends, or family, that sort of understand what I need and how I need to be helped.
And now that you've, I wouldn't say come out of the other side, but now that you've grown up and you've studied it, is it weird looking back and thinking, oh, this was because of this and this was because of that? Or
absolutely, it's so bizarre, you know, and it's so bizarre to see those things. Sort of, you know, I did my degree, as you said, for Open University, but again, that was, you know, because I couldn't go to a school. I was terrified of a university, so I did it at home. I wanted to learn, but I just couldn't have the means to do it in a brick place. But to have, you know, to have those things in front of you and say sort of child development as well, and sort of learning that and be like, well, if this happens to a young person, chances are that they're going to develop this. And it's like, oh, I don't, you know, it's that's what happened there. So I'm still sort of having those experiences of like, right, you know, and obviously, you know, we can have sort of, we throw around daddy issues and things like that there, but, you know, we can sort of see them like, oh, I see that there. Why do you have sort of a hard time trusting men, sort of, you know, that just sort of comes with the territory. But yeah, a lot of sort of things, everything sort of clicked when I was older, definitely, and I was able to sort of tell absolutely everything, you know, even from a standpoint of my eyes. You know, I obviously have sort of a genetic thing with my eyes, and that was always something I really, really struggled with, but more than anybody that I knew that did, because I was the only female sort of thing. And sort of to look back now and see that the things that were said to me about my eyes, it's like, well, obviously you struggled, with all these things that were affecting my mental health quite clearly clicked. So to have that degree helped me understand why I felt the way I did, sort of thing.
And to bring it back to your eyes, what's the condition you have again?
So I have something called BPES, and I actually found out about the actual name of it. I was about 25, 26. It's a very long name. Well, not bore anybody, we might be here a while, but it is BPES. And long story short, that is that I was born with no eyelids. It's a genetic thing. So it's passed down ironically, from my biological father. And I was obviously the only female in my family to have that. So, all boys do too, but obviously girls struggle with sort of their self-worth and things, how they see themselves. But to deal with that as a young person was, on top of that, was extremely crazy. And to sort of have, that was something that was always sort of brought on and manipulated too during my younger years, of sort of like, you need to get them eyes seen to, they're terrible, you'll never find a fella with eyes like that. It was a sort of thing that was bred onto me, that it was not okay to have them.
And I suppose from a personal point of view, for me, I think, if you don't mind me saying, that's where I've seen you come out of yourself the most. Because I remember, like, when I started being friendly with you, the black eyeliner was winged to your ears.
Winged to the heavens.
And you would never, like, I remember, like, a teacher telling you off for wearing makeup, and she said, go and take that off, and you came back with less on, but still had stuff on, so obviously
it didn't,
something you were very insecure about. And I think, do you think maybe it's since you've had your niece who has the same condition, because now you don't, like, I hardly ever see you with makeup now, and you put up photos on social media, and most of them you're pulling the face and don't have makeup on, whereas other girls are glam to the fucking gills, and you just don't give a shit.
I think that it was always something that, being the only female with that was always extremely terrifying, because, again, we weren't really told what it was. I was always sort of given the sort of, my mum was really good with it. She sort of said, there's nothing wrong with you, beautiful the way they are. But it was never talked about, It was never talked about, this is why your eyes are the way they are. And then obviously with the comments that were laid onto that as well, about how they were wrong, they were terrible, things like that, was really, when I was so bad. As you said, I did not leave the house without eyeliner. I would put eyeliner on in the morning when I was in the house, it wouldn't come off. When I had my niece, when my niece was born, and I saw that she had the same eyes, it was a big awakening for me. It was big. There has to be some level that I am the only girl that she'll see with that struggle.
You kind of took a responsibility.
There was definitely a responsibility there, to show that, you can have those eyes and still be beautiful. They're your eyes. It doesn't make you any different than anybody else. And as well as, my niece coming on it, I think that finding out, what the condition was, it took me till I was 27. And that was a huge struggle. That was, something that, anybody was in my life, when I seen that, was terrifying. To learn about that condition, it affects 1 in 50,000, but there's, a community of people with the same eyes. And we all have the same eyes. And I also learned, unfortunately, that the females that have that, it can come, there's 2 types of BPS. And one of those types is type 1, which unfortunately comes with fertility issues. So it's crazy to think that sort of the proteins in your eyes that make up your eyelids also is the proteins that are sort of constructed in your ovaries. So unfortunately it can come with a lot of infertility problems. I know a lot of women who themselves are going through IVF or aren't able to have kids. So there was a lot more understanding of that. It helped me to sort of accept it. And I think that I went rapidly from hating who I was and hating this sort of diagnosis to really accepting it and wanting to advocate for it, and say that it doesn't have to be the way that I perceived it all my life. And it actually says a lot more about someone else that they pointed out rather than me.
And I know me and you are big advocates for slagging it and saying
Definitely.
the Johnny from Rice Bowl was your dad.
Yeah, we do that all the time. And I think it's something I joke about a lot, don't get me wrong. But again, it's something that needs to be talked about more. And I think that's the way I accept it more, is the fact that I make humour about it. Before...
You said that before, that you're happy to...
Yeah, I mean, when we were younger, I remember if anybody said anything about it, I would be bawling my eyes. I bawled my eyes. And I remember crying with you one night, asking you, do my eyes look alright? And you were sort of like, what?
Remember you always asked me.
Yeah.
And then now it gets to the stage where you meet my friends and I say, her dad wants Rice Bowl.
Yep.
And 2 years later, he brings you up and goes, what do you call your friend that owns her dad wants Rice Bowl? And I was like, what? And I go, Tasha, I was only joking.
But I think that it's a question that, was always in my life, was sort of like,
What is it?
It was the fact that Tasha looks, do I look Asian? And it's sort of, it was always something that terrified me. It was something that went through school all the time. She looks Asian. Her eyes are weird, her eyes are slanted, or you would get sort of people that chatted you up with it and things like that there. And it was always sort of mentioned. And it was terrifying to me that sort of, someone thought I was Asian or someone, I would actually be I'm quite okay with someone thinking I'm Asian these days, and it's quite a compliment sometimes.
It seemed like such a big...
It was such a big thing. It was such a horrible thing as well for some reason. I don't know why I perceived it that way. It can be, but don't get me wrong, it can be a bit daunting to sort of be identified. You can almost feel racist for being categorised as Asian when you're not. And sometimes, I almost feel racist for sort of just if someone's asking about it, you sort of say, yeah, well, I am having, my dad's Chinese. It's just easier, when you're just don't want to talk about it.
Someone you're never going to see.
Yeah, someone you're never going to see again. It's easy, just whatever. But you can feel that you've sort of offended someone by falling into that category, and it can be really confusing to be identified as that when that's not really who you are. But I definitely drastically changed. If someone thinks that I'm Asian these days, it's a compliment to me. A lot of Asian people are quite beautiful. So, but I remember when I was younger, that was like the worst thing in the world for someone to say, "Oh my God, you're Asian," because they just didn't believe me that I wasn't.
But I don't think it was the fact that they thought you were Asian. It was just obviously the insecurities that brought.
Oh yeah.
And it's just the fact that it could have been any race or any. Oh, you're this, that, or the other, but it's just because it was linked to that.
Yeah.
That's what.
Yeah,
that's why it hurt so much. It wasn't directed at Asians. It was just that was the general consensus. And then, I'm not Asian. I've got this condition, but this condition is the reason why I'm self-conscious about it.
Yeah,
you're pointing it out, and it was obviously just like a vicious circle kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think it's a mad vicious circle with that because you can. It's bizarre how people react to it. It's I was nasty myself. Obviously people inquire about it. You can get nasty comments. But I myself have made nasty comments about people before because if someone said it about me, well, I'm going to do it too. Do you know what I mean? I remember specifically there was one person in school. I was an asshole sometimes when I was in school and would just, pick out things about people that I didn't like or slag them for it because, if I slag someone else, they're not going to slag me. Push people away sort of thing. Act like hard man, sort of, no one's going to know you. It's a weird way that we all sort of perceive ourselves and how we sort of behave on that.
And now that you're working in that kind of environment, do you see any common issues that you had or you seen when we were younger and it's still going, or do you think it's a different generation with new problems?
I think it can be a different generation with new problems. Yeah, obviously I'd say suicide, again, we have the same problems where kids don't want to talk about suicide. Self-harm and suicide is something that they feel they'll get in trouble for. And the horrible thing is that, I've talked to some young people that do get in trouble for that, for being open about that. It may be hard to believe, but there is some parents out there or some people out there that still believe that mental health is just a myth. It's just not there. Or for a teenager to bring that up, they're self-harming because they just want attention. It's still something that we deal with, but it's amplified times 1,000 with kids these days. You've got the internet where bullying can just happen. You've got the internet where they can learn where to self-harm, how to do that. Drugs are more readily available. It's scary times.
I wouldn't want to be a kid back now.
No.
Preferred back then when there was no camera phones and
Yeah, see,
internet
you
on
know,
your phone.
that's, you know, you think about that, that's horrible also. You know, we've got cameras and things like that now where you're sort of dealing with that, and then a lot of things can happen with camera phones that you don't, you know, you can put up a photo of yourself and someone could tell you your eyebrows are too close together, and that could sit with that could sit with a kid for life. But it's something as simple as that can sort of, you know. But then you've got things times 1,000 with camera phones, like some kid sends a photo to someone that they like and it turns out to be someone else, and it's gone everywhere and it's ruined their life. You know, it's drastic times.
Well, we end every podcast with asking you personally if there's anyone out there struggling mentally who might be feeling the same way that you do, or can empathise with you, or feel like that they're going through similar things. What do you do if you're having a bad day, or if you're feeling down? What do you do to make yourself feel better?
I think it's important to acknowledge how you're feeling. You know, a lot of us can sort of wake up feeling a bit off and shake it off and be like, we're fine, or it's just a bad day. But to have those feelings where they're consistently happening and you feel a change in your life's happening, I think it's important to reach out. Again, we've spoken about how difficult it can be to reach out, unfortunately, sometimes. But there is still an importance of it. You know, not everybody, just because I've had experience with adult mental health services or child mental health services, you know, if it's a child, just because I've had experiences that were negative, you shouldn't take that they're all negative. Do you know what I mean? You should still reach out and get the help. You should reach out to your family or whoever you are close to, because unfortunately some people don't have family that's supportive. But I think that one of the things that it should be given more readily available is that you should reach out to specific charities and organisations that you're feeling that way with. You know, there's a lot of unbelievable charities in Northern Ireland that are there to support you, and that is their simple goal, is to support you. But again, if you don't feel like doing that, it's just important to take a day to yourself, you know, to focus on yourself. It's okay to take days for your mental health. You know, it's okay to say, you know, I really don't feel like coming on to work today because I don't feel like I've mentally managed it. That's not you being overreactive. That sick days also involve mental health days, and it's important to acknowledge your mental health, and that's the main focus. That would be my main thing that I would advocate for, is it should be more open about it. People should be more open about it. People should talk about it, and it's bound to help some way. Talking to somebody has to help some way, because keeping it to yourself, it just never ends well.
Spoke like a true counsellor.
Yeah, that spoke like someone who's experienced it all. No, but yeah.
Alright, well, thank you very much for talking to me, and I feel like we got a bit closer there.
Oh, never get rid of you.
Thank you. Anyone negatively affected by this week's episode, there are a number of links in the bio to help. That's all from me. I will see you next week on That's Mental Mate.